mutes us.
Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, welcome to Casual Friday. I am Brad Wolf, and I am here with...
I'm back, baby. It's me. I'm Ryan. You know that. And it's...
Hey, I'm GM Jim. I'm a little under the weather, so Brad has taken over hosting duties for the day.
I am behind the wheel of the show. This is a dangerous episode.
Buckle your seatbelts, folks.
Yep. So we've got a great show lined up. Clint Steele in the house. Oh, and look at that! Wizards and Warp Drives. Everybody's here.
Kill. Art.
Everybody's here.
So well, if I could find my run sheet, that would be helpful. Got too many windows open. There we are. So we are talking today. Ryan was recently on another Dungeon Tubers channel, so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about Lord of the Rings today. Jim has some silicone show and tell. I don't know what that's about.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Today's roundtable discussion is more about Elon Musk and who owns D&D. So go ahead and get your comments ready for that fiasco. That's going to be fun to dive into. And we've got some cool stuff from Questing Beast, and of course our main topic, which we'll get to, about 15 minutes before the show's over. Our main topic is going to be the new DMG and what we can learn from it. So Ryan, tell us about this Deck Save Dan.
Yeah, so I technically I tied, but I am higher on the list for the Daily Doubles on Dicey Discussions with Deck Save Dan. I beat Brad. We both are sitting at 2, but I'm higher on the list, so I'm saying that I am the winner. But it was a great time. Dan is a great dude, the mysterious, illustrious Tui. Also very good people. I got to actually see and speak to the man behind the curtain. And it was a great time. It's 30 minutes, which is a little short for compared to my conversation with Dan, which was 2 episodes. But we had a great time. There's a ton of weird questions in there. You get to know me very well.
A little bit of childhood trauma in there. Yeah. I watched that.
We went digging.
I loved your thoughts on death scenes, though. The idea of asking players, what's the last thing that goes through your mind as you die? I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, we talked about death for most of the episode, and so only some of it was D&D related. The question of what do you do? I think the question was, what is your ritual for dealing with a PC death? And I don't really have a hard and fast go-to move, because I do actually push that to the players, which is kind of my DM style anyway. But I open it up. I'm willing to drive the bus if no one's going to, or drive the hearse if no one else is going to take the wheel. But if someone dies in combat, I let the combat finish out, because those are a juicy, a couple minutes to hour of time, and that kind of gives everybody a little bit of time to process. And then I will kick it to the player and be like, what are the last thoughts going through this character's mind as they drop? Because even if they're going to be resurrected in 2 minutes, that's still a very powerful, impactful story beat.
Yeah, I'm stealing that, by the way. I'm going to use that from now on.
Take it with my blessing.
Nice.
So speaking of, I don't know, I was going to try to make a transition there, but I couldn't get from death to Lord of the Rings fast enough. All right, so new on D&D Beyond is Free League's Lord of the Rings game, the 5e Lord of the Rings game from Free League. And what I thought was cool about this is the idea that you can run low magic D&D now with 5e. Well, I mean, you've always been able to do that. I'm probably gonna make a video about that, but yeah. So this gives you like 6 new character classes. I think they call them something other than character classes, though.
Callings.
Callings, yeah. And they, and I don't think any of them are spellcasters. So that gives you 6 classes that you can use to run low magic D&D. And this is an article by Jared Rasher, and it goes through basically all, tells you all about the product, Free League's product, and how to use it to run the Lord of the Rings content on D&D Beyond. So basically, I guess I'm kind of rambling here for a second, but first point is this is on D&D Beyond. So another third-party publisher of Free League now added to the list. We've got MCDM and the Dungeon Dudes, and who else we have?
Cobalt Press, Ghostfire, Darrington. I'm forgetting a couple that I'm going to be embarrassed by, but
yeah, we got a lot of third-party content on D&D Beyond now, and Free League makes fantastic stuff. I would love to see more of Free League stuff out there being used. Really great game content. What I found interesting about that is that D&D Beyond doesn't implement this very well. But this article, which is the reason I wanted to share it, this article does a good job of telling you, gives you a go-by here of how to use the D&D Beyond version, if that's what you want to do, to make a D&D Beyond character sheet for Lord of the Rings. But you have to kind of finagle it. You got to, kind of massage it. Like you basically ignore, you don't take a background. And you have to look up your gear kind of separately and make sure that the gear you're using is what's best suited for the Lord of the Rings game. And then you have to go in and add skills. Like the Lord of the Rings game adds new skills, which of course are not in D&D Beyond. So you have to manually add those. So, it takes some finagling to use the product on D&D Beyond. But so I guess my first question to you guys is, what do you think about using this product for a low magic campaign? Would you use these classes? Would you run Lord of the Rings in 5e? Or would you steal these classes and use them to run a different low magic campaign? What are your thoughts on all that?
Man, so I like down to earth, low magic, kind of more deadly, less Marvel Avengers style play. I like low level D&D. I'll drag my feet a little bit on leveling up to enjoy those low levels more. So yeah, this product by Free League is a pretty cool way to do that. I am so conflicted. I've never run a Lord of the Rings game. It's Brad. Who let this guy drive? Like being in Middle Earth, I find too confining in theory. I've never done it. I've never run a Lord of the Rings game because it would be very hard for me to not try to reenact or reinvent the movie. I feel like I wouldn't have the freedom of movement I need to run a game or to play a game. Honestly, even as a player, I'd be a little intimidated. Like I know what's supposed to happen. Let's.
Right.
I'm not going to claim the One Ring for myself.
Yeah, I agree. Jim, what were you gonna say?
I think low magic worlds already exist in Dungeons and Dragons. It's every level before 5. My main question with this is, why are they doing this right now? Why are they introducing like a custom class to D&D Beyond while they're in the middle of a big edition change and where D&D Beyond is going through huge, massive changes? They've recently redone their character builder or part of it that allows you to filter filter materials because they have all this third-party content now. They're doing a much better job of filtering what you can and can't use in a campaign and stuff like that. But it just seems like to release this when it's all broken. Why?
Yeah.
WotC, why?
Yeah. Well, and and maybe it's testing the waters, but you feel like you'd want to get your shit together before you do something like this, because it seems like, I mean, if I was WotC and I'm thinking D&D is under monetized, right? I mean, which it is, because it's hard to monetize an RPG. That's why none of us are getting rich yet. The
You guys are making money?
You would think that if they wanted to start using more and more third-party content and compete with people like Demiplane, right? That you would want to roll this out in such a way that when I click on a Free League product, I get, shuttled to a part of the website that is designed to run Free League products, right? Like, that seems to be the way you would want to go about designing this, so that somebody could pick another game other than D&D and still play it on D&D Beyond, right? That would be some pretty efficient and impressive stuff, and that would make D&D Beyond far more versatile, right?
There is a one internet platform to rule them all agenda here, which Chad is kind of hinting at, where like they want to bring everything in-house for financial reasons. The overarching motivation for this is pretty clear. They want, if you're playing D&D, they want you playing D&D on D&D Beyond, handing Hasbro dollars, and that's their job. I'm not mad about it. What I don't always get is how bad they are at that business side of things. If I am an avid Free League follower, they make awesome content. This is, I believe, the only 5e compatible products in Barham. I don't know.
Room has 5e, yeah.
Has 5e, but it's one of very few. If I'm coming in from Free League, right, and I'm like, oh, I can play on D&D Beyond now. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but now I can play a Free League product on D&D Beyond. All right, I will make this small investment. I forget, well, it's money. This isn't a free product that they're handing out. I'm going to pay this money to Hasbro, and I actually can't use this product on this system. I'm never coming back here. Why would you? And yeah, there's some arguments about this is video game logic. We can patch it later. Going on in the comments, and I get it, but it's so short-sighted. It feels like every mistake. This feels like it's better for Free League, actually. At the end of the day, if I want to play this game, I'm not going to play it on D&D Beyond, which Ryan is happy about. But I don't see Hasbro benefiting their C-suite shareholders or public image by doing this the way
those are both excellent points. I mean, because this is a great product. Like, if I wanted to run, I wanted to really hard commit to low level, or low magic D&D, this is a great way to do it, right? Because I wouldn't run in Lord of the Rings, because for all the reasons you spelled out, Ryan. But I think it would be cool to use these classes in the campaign and do a sword and sandals, themed campaign. I think it'd be really cool. So, but like you said, it's a win for Free League, because it gives them the exposure, and then people are going to realize, well, I can play this game without D&D Beyond, right?
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I hope it's not a bad look for Free League as well, right? All the other D&D Beyond stuff works fine, which that's not true. But my experience with the other in-house D&D stuff is better than this. I mean, half that article, which is really well written, was workarounds to make this actually a feasible thing to do on D&D Beyond. Which is kind of wild at launch. I'm always confused by their decision-making process. I get it. They're soulless corporation, like that's built in. I'm still confused about why they do what they do over there.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's like they start to have a good idea, and then they just pitch it. They just do it. Like there doesn't seem to be like real thought behind when they implement stuff like that. It doesn't make sense to me. So
yeah.
But speaking of stuff that doesn't make sense, Jim's got a show and tell.
Hey everyone. I wanted to address a couple of comments in the chat first. When we were talking about death scenes, Twin Steel asked about last gasp actions. Like, you're gonna die, you can't change that, you can make a difference, what do you do? I'm a big fan of these. I got on this train when I was learning Daggerheart because they have their what do they call it?
Blaze of Glory.
As one of your death options, which I think is very cool and should absolutely be stolen for every system. You know, you're gonna die, but you do get to do one last thing before you go. And bowls, yeah, I saw that bowls are an inventory item in. Well, you know, the halberts do love their leaf. So I have a little show and tell for you. I recently received this as a gift. This is a D20. Wait. This is an enormous D20. Like, for example, this is an oversized. This is a 28 millimeter D20. This is like a 35 millimeter D20. This thing is huge, but it's silicone.
Oh, it bounces?
The big bouncy silicone. I can't bounce it high enough to get on my webcam, but yeah, it's a giant bouncy die. And I'm a huge fan of jumbo dice. Because, you know, when you're a dungeon master and you want to have that super tense roll in front of the table moment, if you're rolling a teeny tiny D20 that the guy at the far end of the table can't see, it kills your dramatic moment. So you got to have a big, yes, you can throw it at players, Wizards and Warcries, that's absolutely true. But a big chunky D20 that everybody can see also if it bounces around the table. That's fun. So that's my show and tell. It's 20-sided die. It was a gift. If I can find the link for it, I'll put it as a comment in case anybody wants to chase up their own.
That is awesome. And if I owned one, if I was in your house right now, it would take me about 3 minutes to break that lamp behind you. I would just huck that thing so much.
Well, I've got a show and tell too. I recently picked up. This is Next Level Miniatures. They're like encounters in a box. They're super affordable. There's like 18 miniatures in this little box, and they're all themed. Right, I'm gonna pull up the. Well, if I can do this, I was gonna. All right, I am bad at this, Jim.
What is happening here?
Chaos reigns.
There we go. Share screen. That's what I was trying to get. Yeah. So these come in these boxes. Like this one is the Ruined Keep Encounter Kit, and it's got 17 miniatures in this one. And this one is kind of dragon themed. You got a couple of drakes in here, and you got a bunch of kobolds in here. And so the Granddad has the remote. Yep. But this is the one that I bought, was this like necromancer themed one, and it has like this cool Stitcher character in here, and some like stitched together mutants, and some ghouls, and it's just like this like creepy necromancer theme. And these things are super affordable. Like they're like $20. So you're, in fact, they may even be cheaper than that. Where's it? Oh, $30. $30 for 18 miniatures.
Brad, I know nothing about mini painting. How long does it take you to paint one of those miniatures?
I can paint up a miniature in like under 2 hours. Like if I was to batch paint, like I probably could do like if I picked this box set and put like all 4 of the mutants together, I could knock all 4 of those mutants out in about the same time it would take me to paint one other miniature, right? Because you're just doing the same thing to all 4 of them. So batch painting goes quicker, but that's also like there's a bunch of speed painting techniques you can use to paint miniatures, so they go faster. But if you want like really cool detail, like I've spent 6 hours on a miniature before because I wanted it to like you know be as good as I could get it. But most of the time, I'm just like trying to rush through a group of miniatures to get them ready for the next week's game. So there's a wide range of how quickly you can paint miniatures. But if you're into miniatures, these are super affordable, and they have really crisp detail. They're really good. They're much better than the Whiz Kid miniatures or Reaper Bones miniatures, if you're familiar with those. They have much better, crisper details. But they do have a pretty generous amount of like flash and mold lines. So, and so that's a trade-off, right? You're not going to get affordable miniatures that are perfect out of the box. So they take a little bit of cleanup. You got to take like the back of your hobby knife and scrape off the extra edges. But yeah, I thought they were a great value. They're really cool, and they come in these themed kits. But you can also buy them individually. So like I bought this Necromancer theme thing, and then I bought this cool individual Necromancer to add to it. She reminds me of Lady Briarwood from Vox Machina. So I got her to be my big boss for this set of weirdos. So I just thought it was cool. And it's a great way to support a non-WotC related company.
People asking in chat, what are they made out of? Yeah.
So they're a plastic. I'm not exactly sure what type of plastic. But they're not resin. I know some people don't like resin because you have to use a very specific glue to glue resin parts together, and sometimes that can be tricky. But they're a harder plastic than like your typical board game miniatures. If you're familiar with the soft plastic that come with a lot of the board games nowadays, they're similar. The plastic quality is similar to the new Reaper plastic. The old Reaper Bones were that white, pretty soft plastic. But the newer Reaper miniatures are the little bit harder gray plastic. These next level miniatures are in that category. I thought they feel like, to me, a little better quality than the new Reaper gray plastic. But like I said, there's more flash and mold lines on them than the new Reaper gray plastic. So if that helps answer that question.
Sure.
All right, now I'm going to try to hit the button again.
Oh, no. Buckle up.
I did it. All right. So, and then, so speaking of next level stuff, Jim, tell us about Landlocked Warlocks. Oh, you're talking.
Yes.
There you go.
Hello. You may not realize this, but right now you are watching the Landlocked Warlocks. That is the 3 of us. That is one of the names that we go by. Also, we have our new YouTube channel, the Landlocked Warlocks. So you can go. That's why you show up, because you never know what's going to happen, right? You never know. Landlocked Warlocks is a separate YouTube channel. We also stream there on our individual channels. Go subscribe to the Landlocked Warlocks. It's going to be the future home of our actual plays and this show and other stuff. So go subscribe. Landlocked Warlocks on YouTube.
All right, Ryan's got the symbol down there.
I think I hit it. I think it's good, guys. I think I did it.
Yeah, no, I got it. There was an L and a W. I saw it. Made sense. All right, and now we're time for our roundtable discussion. So get out your pitchforks and torches, and we are going to have a great time here. So, Elon Musk has been the topic since last week. I felt like I was excited because, since our show's on Friday, we hardly ever get to break news. And Musk threw this like WotC should burn in hell comment out there last week. And we talked about it last week. And of course, now we've got responses from a lot of people in the Dungeon Tuber community, which I was going to go back. I think Fred said something about Esper the Bard got torched by the topic. Now I have to go back and see what happened there.
They took a strong stance where other people are running away from.
Yeah, so I want to go watch that now. But so I thought I would hit some of the highlights and then kind of discuss the more recent comment that Musk made. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what some of the other Dungeon Tubers have said on this Elon Musk WotC should burn in hell topic. I thought that that Bob had a good point.
Yeah.
And he basically said, remember, this, Musk's job is to make you angry and retweet and see more ads on his website. I thought that was a pretty insightful comment by Bob to just point out that, this guy, he makes money by getting people's attention. And, he owns a platform where he's trying to make money by people arguing about stuff. That's, pretty much all X is, right? So any thoughts on Bob's take there?
I think it was brilliant. I think it was really good to take a step back, calm down, kind of consider the motivations behind things. Twitter is hemorrhaging users for a bunch of reasons, and we exist on the internet, and we know that saying stuff that people disagree with, right? Like we're being warned not to talk about this because Esper's taking a world of he's getting trolled, but I'm sure those numbers are going up. The algorithm doesn't care how you feel, it just cares that you feel. So if I piss you off, you're going to come and yell at me, and that benefits the bottom line as far as the metrics of the channel go. It doesn't help my mental clarity, which is why I was glad I wasn't here last week to talk about this stupid stuff. But he knows what he's doing. He's playing chess. It's not checkers there. He's not going to buy WotC. Don't, you can pie in the sky what that might look like in a interesting, creative way, maybe. But he's just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And if you get a bunch of nerds angry, they're going to come tweet. Whether for or against, he doesn't care.
Right.
Yep. They don't care about you.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to talk about this because there's an ever-growing list of things that people can talk about that are completely drained of nuance. Like there's an ever-growing list of things out there that you just can't talk about without brutally pissing off some people, and Elon Musk is one of those things now. 10 years ago you could have a conversation about him and it wouldn't piss off 100 million people, but it's different now. And the other reason I'm reticent to talk about this is I think this story is a big nothing burger and it will go away. Elon was joking about buying MSNBC the other day. He's on Twitter, he trolls. That's what he does. He is the king of Twitter now, so he is the king of trolling, and I don't think we should take most of the things he says seriously.
Right. So what I thought might lead to a little more interesting discussion is Dan from Dungeon Craft had some interesting thoughts on the original book that started all this, right? So if you weren't here last week, if you've not been paying attention, Wizards has published this history book of D&D. Is like this over 500-page book, talks all about the development of the game. And at the beginning of the book, they had the foreword, which said, hey, Gary wasn't perfect. Here's some bad things Gary said. But we just want to clarify that before we move on and talk about, the history of Gary Gygax and the history of Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of people took offense to that forward. And Dan from Dungeoncraft, he made some interesting points. He said that Ed Greenwood was credited in the D&D movie, but Gary wasn't. And in his opinion, he felt like that decision was kind of a slight towards Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. And then he went on to say, he talked about the whole concept of separating art from artist, right? And he gave him some examples: Picasso, Roman Polanski, Michael Jackson, people who did far worse things than Gary Gygax did. And he said, we don't put disclaimers on their stuff. No one puts a disclaimer, out there before you listen to, Smooth Criminal. So his question was, why do we have to have disclaimers on RPG books? What are your guys' thoughts on those 2 points?
I really struggle coming to the separating art from artist point without being completely self-serving and kind of blinding myself. I like that, so I can separate it. This person's a jerk and I didn't like it anyway, so you're bad if you consume this other product. I will say we're talking about a history book, and speaking of nuance getting lost, it doesn't say in the beginning of the player's handbook, hey, 45 years ago, the person who wrote the 3 editions ago version of this said some real problematic things a couple times. That's not part of the PHB. If you looked at a history book of Michael Jackson, Roman Polanski, you might have some, I would say, a much higher percentage of the content dealing with problematic things, and there wouldn't necessarily be an association that they were trying to distance themselves from. Wizards of the Coast is trying to position themselves as separate from a few key things that Gary Gygax said in writing very publicly. And I don't know, they're going to say that. They're going to say that, I don't know, this is healthy for you, but the FDA, I'm not promising you, I'm not a doctor. We get these disclaimers on things all the time to make a big deal. I feel like, I'm curious how many people read the book who are yelling about the book. I'm going to say very few.
Yeah, I have not purchased the book yet because I'm pretty sure my wife bought it for me for Christmas. So I had to look this up. But if what I looked up was accurate, it's about 5 paragraphs about the negatives of Gary Gygax. And then it's 576 pages about Gary and Dave and how they built the game. So, and I think you're absolutely right, Ryan. If we were putting these disclaimers in the Dungeon Master's Guide, in the Player's Handbook, I'd be like, that's a little excessive. But this is a history book, and you can't talk about history without talking about some of the bad things that happened in history.
Here's a question. In the Call of Cthulhu Keepers rulebook, at the beginning, there is a section where it talks about inspiration for the game, and it talks about H.P. Lovecraft and talks about how problematic he was. Are Call of Cthulhu players upset about that? Are they mad that H.P. Lovecraft has been slandered brutally for his terrible beliefs 150 years ago? I don't know.
You should tweet about it. Get some engagement.
Maybe I will.
So the and the other thing too, to Dan's point about that Ed Greenwood was credited in the movie, but Gary and Dave weren't. I think they were legally obligated to credit Ed Greenwood because they were using specific locations from the Forgotten Realms, right? They were using Waterdeep and very specific other named locations. So I think they were legally obligated to mention Ed Greenwood. So little pushback on his point there.
You know, one of the things I did a video recently about the history of when TSR failed and WotC came in and bought them. And what were we talking about right before that? I just completely went blank. Sorry, I've had cough medicine today.
Greenwood.
The artist stuff.
You know, when after Gygax left TSR, they tried to sue the crap out of him whenever he kept making new products. But then when Wizards bought the company, they reached out to both Gygax and Arneson, and all I could find out about the deals they made with them, that they made it right, is what it said. And I wonder if that involved having their names taken off future projects or that kind of thing. Like if it was some sort of, the reason that they're not credited in the movie at all has something to do with that, whatever deal Wizards of the Coast made with them in the late 90s.
And it could be some like SAG stipulation, you know? It could be all sorts of things. Like the PHB mentions Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson on the first page, and they are unequivocally gushing about them. There's no stipulation, but they also don't quote them saying some difficult things. So again, there's a lack of context and nuance on both sides of this conversation, I think.
Right. Yeah, both the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide mention Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson on the first page. Yep. So they're definitely not trying to erase Gary and Dave. So Jim, you weren't able to find any more details, because I had always heard that when WotC bought D&D that they did pay both Gary's estate, and I guess Gary was still alive at the time.
Yeah, he was still
They paid
around.
Gary and they paid Dave's estate when they bought when Wizards of the Coast bought D&D.
Yeah, I couldn't find any details on exactly what the contracts of those payments stipulated.
But there was some monetary resolve there for those guys, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of these people who are who have a sugar-coated idea of what D&D was like in the 80s are like thinking about like what they were doing with their friends in their parents' basement, but like read a history book about what happened with TSR and what the late stage of, watch Jim's video about it. Like things got a little crazy. Things got more than a little crazy. Gary Gygax did way better in the Wizards of the Coast era than the late TSR era. I'll put it lightly.
Yeah, I would highly recommend When We Were Wizards. It's a 12 or 13 or 14 part podcast that goes into great detail about the fall of TSR. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen and a lot of backstabbing going on at TSR from what I've read and heard. It was pretty big mess. But yeah, and like I, as a kid growing up, like Ryan said, I was literally playing D&D in my friend's basement. My friend Rob was probably one of the only people in Florida who had a basement, so felt special. And we didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. I learned about all that TSR drama, years later when I was in my 20s, and when I guess third edition came out, right? When WotC put out third edition, there was a lot of talk about the history of the game and the transition with WotC taking over. It wasn't until then that I started learning about all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes. Because yeah, when I was a kid in the 80s, we were busy building worlds and killing monsters and doing dumb shit. We didn't pay attention to any of that stuff.
As it should be.
And that's how it is, like last year during the OGL, one of my D&D groups, we never talked about it at all. We met regularly through the whole thing, and nobody ever mentioned it. Most D&D players are not like us. They're not plugged into the industry. They just want to kill monsters with their friends.
Yeah, yeah. My D&D group, my players, they had questions. So like I filled them in on what was going on, but none of them were going out on their own to learn that stuff. Of course, they knew I would tell them about it, but I think the YouTube community, I think people who watch our channels and Bob World Builder and Dungeon Craft and all these channels, we are far more tuned into the details of this stuff. The casual player, there's far more casual players out there who probably still don't know anything about the OGL debacle.
Yeah.
Right. But so just to wrap all this up, Ben Milton from Questing Beast did a great video about all this. Can Elon Musk save D&D? And the answer is no. He had some really good quotes. He said, "No one can save D&D, and no one can ruin it either."
Mm.
I thought that was a really good quote. And he said the only way Wizards of the Coast, or Elon Musk for that matter, can ruin D&D is if you believe the framing, right? Wizards of the Coast wants you to believe that the framing, that D&D is what they publish. That's how they frame it. D&D is what WotC publishes. And that gives you a D&D experience. If you buy into this perspective, then it matters who owns D&D IP. If you don't buy into this viewpoint, then it doesn't matter. Right? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'm a big Ben Milton fan for a lot of reasons, for a lot of what he puts out there on the channel and his adventure and his game. I very much fall in line with that video. I recommend everybody watch it. It's a little less flamey than some of the more dramatic, as Phil puts it. YouTube drama is the fourth pillar of adventure. Ben had a very prescient take, and it's kind of similar to why I am not so careful to say TTRPGs instead of D&D. I think D&D, the term is broader than D&D, the 5th edition books that exist right now, or even the 5/8.5 editions that have existed that officially say D&D. I think using D&D and TTRPGs interchangeably, I understand why people don't like that. I get it. I say TTRPGs. I just did 6 times, so don't come at me. But D&D is bigger than any one person or company or corporation. It is a activity that we do together with our friends, with our family. It's a folk tradition. It is a basket of 8 different games and hobbies that appeal to all sorts of different kinds of people. It is much broader than whatever they're deciding in a boardroom, or whatever some billionaire who buys up stuff he doesn't like they can't touch it. They can't take it away. And knowing that and remembering that is kind of why I didn't want to not touch this today, even though I hate it and I don't want to yell about people I don't like all the time. But the occasional reminder that D&D is bigger than any one company or owner, and that it's ours and we can do with it as we want, and so can everybody else, and we don't have to agree if we're not sharing a table at that exact moment. That's always good. The DIY spirit is baked in from the very beginning. We are playing somebody's homebrew version that was duct taped to 2 other games. That's how it all started. That's baked into the DNA, and we're going to do that for another 50 years at least.
Yeah, the Twin Steel points out that Daddy Rolled a 1 did a breakdown of how there really should be 11 editions of the game. Right? If you break out the 2 different basic editions, and then the Beckme edition, and then the revision of 4th edition, right? You break out all those different versions of D&D. That's 11 different editions that are called D&D. Then we have all the retro clones, and then the new spinoffs like Shadow Dark and Five Torches Deep. There's so many versions of this game, right? The best quote of all, but from Ben from Questing Beast, which I think applies to far more than just role-playing games. He says the idea of a monolithic entity that controls things is comforting. If that could happen, if some monolithic entity can control D&D, then people are going to believe that they could stop the bad ideas and the bad people from playing D&D. But he says all of that is an illusion, right? There is no perfect version of D&D. There's no perfect person to control D&D because D&D means so much to so many different people, right? So the illusion that if WotC could just get their shit together, or if somebody would, buy WotC, or if the investors could separate WotC from Hasbro, right, then it would all be better. But like that's an illusion. There's no way you can control all of a game, especially a game like D&D that has so many different versions, so many different types of players. There's no perfect version of D&D that's going to work for everybody. So it's ridiculous to try to think that you can have one entity that would control it and make it played, the way it's supposed to be played.
I think we all enjoy fretting over the future of D&D because worrying together gives us a sense of community and brings us together. So even though we're worrying, it feels good because we're doing it together. I think D&D is going to be fine. Tabletop games are going to be fine. Nobody's going to ruin them or save them. They're going to be just the way they are, fine.
It's a glorious mess, and it's okay, guys. Have fun.
Yeah. I think we probably should just go ahead and skip to our main topic. We had some other cool stuff from Ben, but maybe we can save that till next week. So we can just go ahead and get to our main topic. Does that work for you guys?
Sure. Either way.
You're the boss.
All right. I don't know if I like being in charge. Jim, you need to take this job back.
Get well soon.
Yeah. Tots and pairs, as my my D&D group likes to say to each other. Instead of thoughts and prayers, to get well, tots and pairs.
Yeah.
Tots and pairs.
Yeah.
Mostly tots.
Mostly tots. Tots are definitely better than pairs. So let's get into the new Dungeon Masters guide. We left off last time in the running the game section. We had just discussed the multiple DMs is where we wrapped up at the end of last show. And now we are into talking about the narrative, right? So, and if I had this queued up better, I wouldn't have to just make everybody dizzy by scrolling up so fast.
We need theme music. I'm getting elevator vibes.
You're so close.
I'm almost there. There it is. Narration. So the first tip here is lead by example, right? That's the first tip they give new Dungeon Masters is if you want your players to, to buy into the narrative, you got to give them narrative, right? You've got to describe stuff. And then they mention brevity, right? You want cool descriptions, but you want to be able to do it quickly, for pacing and sake. And then atmosphere, they talk about, what are you guys' thoughts on all that sort of stuff? Like drawing players' attention.
Yeah, I think distinguishing options should kind of be the lead here, where it's like in your description, adjectives, atmosphere, all very good. Keep it punchy and make sure that in bold or highlighted or with emphasis, there is a clear thing for the players to interact with, or even better, multiple things for the players to interact with, so that they can pick up the ball when you pass it to them.
I really like this advice just up above that, where it says to pick a couple of the senses. I've always made it a habit of picking 3 senses, and so it's very easy to rattle off 3 details of 3 different senses. You know, the party enters the town. They feel the rutted roads from wagon wheels under their feet as the train becomes muddy, and smell the smell of fresh baked bread coming from a bakery down the street, and also the chiming of bells from a chapel at the far end of town. That's 3 quick senses, and it's like I've pretty much told you everything you need to know about what the entering the town is like, and then I can begin to describe the different areas around the town.
Man, you're good at that. You should write books or something.
Yeah, I think the distinguishing options and is really the key, and that's the, you know, giving players clear, distinct choices is probably one of the most powerful things you can do as a game master, and giving them informed choices, like, you know, you can get to the dungeon by the long road around the woods, or you can go through the woods as the crow flies. But, you know, the druid has heard that those woods are filled with goblins, and the ranger knows that the old road is taxed by a big ogre that guards the one bridge. So, you know, that way now they have some idea, even if those are not fully true, right? They're kind of false rumors. There is a choice to make, and those choices have a clear consequence.
Yeah, I will say for this one, what is proprioception? Is that your sense of like balance?
You
by
got to use
context
real
clues?
words, Twin Steel.
Yeah. I didn't study medicine. The other thing is I will absolutely use like a 6th sense. I do it sparingly because I don't want to tell the players how their character feels emotionally, but I will absolutely be like, there's a vibe. Like, this place feels creepy. Like, I will explicitly say that, especially early on in a session or a setting, to like really bang home, like, there's cobwebs and it's all creaky, but like you just walk in and it feels like something's wrong, and you don't quite know what or why or where, but you have a vibe. You have a 6th sense. Knowing where your body parts are in space, fascinating.
Yeah, proprioception, I think is how you pronounce it.
Proprioception.
Yeah,
Knowing where your body parts are in space.
yeah.
I haven't, but I will next week.
I struggle with that, Ryan. That's a great tip. Because I'm trying not to tell the players how their character feels. I try not to insert the emotion, but I try to give them that 6th sense, that instinct sometimes. And especially, I don't lead with that. Like, I'll lead with, you know, you can smell the scent of smoke coming from the hall to your left, but you can see the light and hear muffled voices coming from the hall to your right. You know, I'll lead with, you know, those descriptors about the environment, but then if they make a perception check or they make an insight check, then I might add a little bit of that 6th sense stuff. The whispered voices, they sound like have a concerned tone to them. You may have this feeling that they're eavesdropping on you, right? Something like that. So I might add some of that 6th sense kind of stuff after they make a successful check.
Also, a good trick is just describe what their skin feels. You know, hair sticking up on the back of the neck, feeling the cold on your exposed arms, feeling the sun on your nose. And if you're in a seaside town, you can always say you can feel the extra humidity. You can taste the tang of the sea in your mouth. Describing what people feel on their skin is kind of, in a way, it's like intimate and can really put you there, I feel like.
That's a good point. You can also get those like chills run up your spine, like when you're trying to convey there's something supernatural about.
I like the feeling that you're being watched. Like, that is 100% like a physical perception. I don't know which, it doesn't fit in one of those 5 categories. I mean, maybe it's touch. Someone's eyeballs are touching you from far away. Like, I don't know what that is, but we've all experienced it, and now your characters are.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you can always, describe the vibes of a room, right? You walk into the tavern and, you can describe it with like, more of the show don't tell, right? Smiling faces, sounds of laughter, and, jovial music being played by the bard in the corner, right? Or you can also just say it like there's happy but casual vibes, kind of like Casual Friday.
Hey. And I will straight up, more and more lately, like I only recently became aware that like some people don't have the ability to form pictures in their mind, because I am very far on the other end of that spectrum. So I have become more and more and more direct, to the point where, like everyone has like lifted a movie scene or a movie set and like described it. I will straight up be like, so you ever see this? That's what's happening here. And that is so much quicker and more immediate. And it's not my preferred method, but it gets 5-6 people on the same page in a much quicker and more surefire way. And that's not how I describe every room you walk into, but I no longer stop myself from doing that. Hey, in those old-timey cartoons where one thing was clearly drawn on a different cell because it's going to move, I say that once every 3 months, because it's just like, yes, I know exactly what that is. And yeah, I do want you to interact with this. Or if you made the perception check, yeah, there's one particular book that's standing out as if it were written, was drawn on a animation cell in 1968.
I had a player in my last group. I had a player who had an aphantasia, and I was a really big fan of Theater of the Mind combat. And one day after a session, he just said, I can't really like picture the stuff in my head when we're doing the combat. I often get confused. So we switched over to Albert Rodeo, and he was much happier. He was like more engaged, more tactical in combat. It was like exactly what he needed, because he couldn't see it.
Yeah, some good tips there, and some good tips in chat too. I like was it Phil who said something about characters who are skilled in Arcana might be able to detect the energy of like ley lines, or just the presence of magic. That's another way to to invite the player into a scene, is like, well, you're a spellcaster, so you feel this. You're a dwarf, so you can tell that the stone floors are uneven, right? Just not necessarily making the players make a roll, but you can invite them in by describing the general scene, and then give specific players extra detail based on their class or their skill sets.
And be generous with that information. When I was a baby DM, I was so concerned about like which is the appropriate skill, that I would put everything behind a check. Or I thought that was like the central game loop, because it seems to be roll a dice, you did good, here's a cookie, here's information. But actually here's a ton of information that's relevant. Maybe it's all pointing to one or two things. And you are proficient in history, you know this about this. You are proficient in religion, you know this about this. No checks required. You get that for free. And it's not just cool atmospheric stuff. It's pointing at decision points, interactive elements of the room, the dungeon, the scenario, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, great point. Well, and then that leads us to the converse of that, which is secrets and discovery. So this section goes into the idea that that it is fun sometimes to have secrets that maybe only one player knows. How do you guys manage that in your game?
It's easy online. So one of my nights I'm playing online, so I will like send Discord messages, or like will text. Like I will use I run a fairly lo-fi digital online game, but those are tools that I will 100% use immediately. Like I am texting with people even, and now we're on camera, so I'll like do it down here. But yeah, there are ways to target one player. It's a little bit harder at a table, but I've texted players while we're sitting at the same table, and like they'll laugh about it. They'll react and like laugh about it the first time you do it. So they'll probably blow your cover. But yeah, there are ways.
I will blatantly text. I'll be like, "Hey, Alex, check your phone," and then all the other players are like, "What's going on? What's Alex know?" Right, and that ratchets up the tension a little bit. Alex is my player who plays warlocks all the time.
And you're just texting him memes. It's like a dick butt or something. It's not even anything relevant to the game.
But I need to do that. I need to when you roll the dice for no reason, I need to just text Alex for no reason. But because he's always playing the warlock, so he's always got some scheme cooking behind the scenes, which always drives the plot forward. He's a fun player to have at your table. But yeah, so I have had like secrets kind of backfire at times. Have you guys had any of those like bad experience where like somebody at the table wants to plot against another player's character?
Yeah, I try to talk them out of it. It's very rare that goes well, and even when it's not a disaster, it's very rare that it's like cool and satisfying in a way that just like playing things straight wouldn't have improved upon. But that's my limited experience.
Yeah,
I guess I've been in situations before where I've given the players information that their PCs wouldn't know, and often that's the players appreciate that. But I've been in a situation before where I gave the players information the PCs wouldn't know, and the players got mad because they were like, "Well, how do we find this out now? Like, we know this, but how do we get our PCs to know this?" And I was like, "I don't know. Figure it out. I don't know." And so they were like, "We would rather just not know things that our PCs don't know."
That is something you have to be so judicious with. I may have misunderstood your question, Brad. I realize now. Like, at the right table with the right players, I will 100% in the right circumstances in game be like, what you don't know is this is what's happening on screen, and that could be amazing. But it can be impossible for some players to not immediately run into that room and like metagame it. They can't really like close that loop in their brain ever again.
Yeah.
So you got to have the right people. Yeah, PvP secrets suck, but like character, I think there's a good way to metagame. Not a popular opinion because a lot of people can't even conceive of that. But there's a potential there for the metacognition of the player improving the experience and the story the characters tell.
Yeah, my current group does a pretty good job of using meta information well and not crossing that line between player knowledge and character knowledge. They do a pretty impressive job of that. But I have had groups where, ironically, the two players had the same first name, and they really didn't like each other outside of the game. Even though they came in with this whole group of friends. So I started running this campaign for these three people, and they kept bringing their friends in. So these two guys were in the same friend group, but they didn't like each other, and they were passive aggressively messing with each other's characters, and it was just the most annoying thing in the background. But I also used to play with a group of war gamers who were very good about like competitive play and not taking it personally. And in that group, we could have player versus player secrets, and it wasn't a problem, and it actually added to the tension and the drama of the story. So I think it varies from player to player, and group to group.
I just ran an evil campaign, and it wasn't like decided at session 0 so much. It was like, oops, all evil. But with a group of guys that I've been playing with for a long time, we have relationships outside of the game. There's a lot of trust and communication there. So it was awesome. And the players who you've never seen before, who show up day one to a group of strangers and like, I want to be an evil character. That's the guy I'm afraid of. The person who's like, oh, here's my secret. I want to secretly be the bad guy. I don't know any of these people. Like, no, that's not where you start. Talk to me in a year or two. We can do some very cool stuff with that. That's not where we're starting. You can't be that edgy meme. I've seen it too many times, buddy.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you have to kind of earn the right to those kind of things. Like if you have to be a part of the group for a while, be collaborative, participate well before you start playing evil characters or doing player versus player content. Yeah, that's great advice. The next part of the chapter here is resolving outcomes, and this goes back to what you were saying, Ryan, just a little bit ago. Is like, when do you roll the D20?
Do you want to give me the official answer? Or you want me to vamp? Because I'll do it. I'll say words.
Well, so the questions that they raise here is, when is a D20 test warranted? What kind of D20 test, and which ability does the test use? Right. So they kind of break down, and give advice as to what skills to use when. They give you this cool little chart, which I liked the fact that with charisma, they mentioned confidence, poise, and charm. Had nothing about physical attractiveness in there. So this is just some general advice, but I thought we could riff on this a little bit, because I think it's like you were saying earlier, Ryan, you don't want to lock too much behind the dice.
Some of my favorite sessions, we didn't roll straight up, and that's not. I'm a mathy worry game. Like I have a lot of combat in my game. I'm not the theater kid. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but some of my favorite sessions, we never touched the dice, and my players agree. Like I didn't come to that conclusion on my own. And then if you go through a session like that, and then you have a big fight, woo, dice are fun again.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you lock too much behind the dice, you risk trapping the players, right? If they have to get through this door, or they have to find this particular letter, or they have to talk to this specific NPC, and then on top of that door is locked, or that specific NPC is, has a bad taste in their mouth of the player, so it's going to be even harder for them to roll persuasion checks to get the information out of that. Like, the idea of DMing is you want to present challenges, but you also want to move the story forward, right? So you don't want to put too much behind the dice rolls, because, like you were saying earlier, Ryan, you want to give a lot of information early on, so the players have informed choices, and then use the dice to add to it, right? If they say, hey, can I make a history check, or can I make an insight check, right? Then you can add additional information based on their successful dice rolls.
It's also the fact that people just like to roll dice.
Yeah.
But you also, on the other hand, you want to also honor passive skills, especially if people put effort into like building up a big passive perception. That guy who has the 27 passive perception at level 8, he doesn't want to make perception checks. He just wants to know where everything is. That's why he has that 28 passive perception. He worked at that to get that 28 passive perception. So he just wants to know where everything is in the room as soon as he walks in.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I like I said before, I often reward like character creation choices. Like if you have a background in this, or you have, if you're this particular race, I'm going to use that as a way to, to hand out additional information, right?
And I do like what you were saying before, Brett, of like having a spectrum of success, right? You were proficient in history. You asked me something that your character would know. Make a history check to see how much you're getting rewarded for being proficient in history in the first place. Oh, you rolled the natural one. All right, that sucks. You only get the baseline. I need to advance the plot, regardless of what you rolled.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, oftentimes I've already given them some information. So if they roll a 1, I'm like, yeah, that's all you know. But if they roll higher, then I'll elaborate a little bit. If they roll really high, then I'll try to give them 2 or even 3 pieces of additional information. And that, I think, is the best way to put lore into your players' hands, right? Is when they make a successful check, finding out the lore feels like a reward. They just, made the math rocks go click clack, right? So, then you're giving them the lore that you want to show off about your world, but you're giving it to them when they're hungry for it because they just earned it. They feel like, ooh, this is my cookie. Like you were saying earlier, I rolled the dice. Now I'm getting something extra. So that lore that you otherwise would just have to dump when, you need them to know it. Now you're giving that out to them as a reward, and they feel like they've earned it. That lore becomes more important than just if you had told them these random facts about this, this dungeon or this region or this forest.
And the challenge, the difference between good lore and dump lore is this information actionable? Is it going to help the player characters navigate this situation, achieve their goals? Does it create some kind of leverage for them? If it doesn't, if it's irrelevant to the characters, that's probably going to be irrelevant to the players too, unless you have a certain kind of player, which I love those kinds of players who are like, oh, tell me about your cool world. Tell me about the dream you had the other night. But like, if they can't do stuff with that information, it's going to be a lot less interesting and a lot less appealing to them. Whereas if they can hand that cookie as a key to this analogy's getting away from me, but then they're like, oh, cookies are great. I want more cookies. That was a great cookie.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I've had the lore had an unintended consequence. Like specifically, I had a player who peeked into the room and saw that this room had chandeliers made out of, the bones of a bull and human, right? There was like a mix of human bones and a bull skull and these chandeliers. There's 2 of them hanging from the ceiling of this dining hall. And the player said, can I make a history or religion check? Do I know, what those might represent or what they mean? And then I gave him, I just made up some lore about how like people worship bulls in this, this society, centuries ago. And since I had lore to explain why these chandeliers were weird, they felt safe entering the room. But it was a trap. The chandeliers were skeletal minotaurs that dropped down and attacked them. So they were like, dang, we thought this was safe because Brad had a reason for these to be here. So like I didn't expect that, that lore to disarm them and make them feel safer entering the room, but it worked, and it made the trap that much more, kind of surprising. I thought it was really cool.
Stolen. That's mine now.
That's pretty cool.
The next thing here is ability scores, and I wanted to look at this. This is one of the first things I looked at when I got my copy of the DMG, because I'm still curious. Because remember, in the player's handbook, we talked about this. There's the list of the new actions you can take, right? Mm-hmm. The search action, there's like a knowledge. What is the knowledge action now? Study action. Yep. So every one of those actions corresponds to a skill, right? So every skill is represented by that new list of actions you can take, except for athletics and acrobatics. So my question back then was, does that mean you can take athletics and acrobatics actions as part of your movement and it doesn't have to require your action? Because those two are not listed in the actions you can take. So I wanted to see what the Dungeon Master's Guide said about this, and they don't address it here either. So that was my thought, and that's how I've been running my game. Is I'll let you take I'm letting you make an athletics skill or acrobatics skill as your movement if you're skilled in those things.
I'll do that when it's something crazy. Like I want to jump up on these barrels and run across them. Like, okay, baseline, that's clearly difficult terrain. You're only getting 15 feet of movement. Make an athletics check to see if you can do it suave. But either take your 15 feet, roll an athletics check, and maybe you do it and get twice as far, or maybe you biff it. Player's choice.
Yeah. The other thing I've done is when players want to do too much in one turn, like I want to run all the way across the room and I want to jump off the balcony and attack the the monster. Well, if they use up all their movement getting across the second story, and they throw themselves off the balcony, I will let that drop be a saving throw. So if you use up all your movement, you're not using that to make an athletics check or acrobatics check, and you still want your action to be able to make your attack. What for me covers the action of the fall is now a saving throw, because you're not intentionally choosing, you're not using any of your action economy to account for that 20-foot drop that you're about to make.
What I've done sometimes is change the DC based on whether or not they want to use their full action to do something. So if somebody wants to do an athletics thing, jumping on the barrels and running across, I would let them do that for free with no action cost, because that's not the intent of their turn. If the intent of their turn is to run across the barrels to do something else, then yeah. But if they're like running across the barrels to try to knock the barrels over, that's your action. Like, what is the intent of your turn, and that is the action. But like I was saying before, I'll let a player make a free perception check on their turn without spending an action, but the DC will be higher than if they spend their action doing it.
I do that with study still. Like, you get a recall knowledge, whatever you want to call it. Like, you get that for free if you would know the sort of thing. If you want to take your time, if you want to spend these 6 seconds literally studying this, pondering it, cool. If you're going to run 30 feet and shoot a guy with a bow and arrow, then like, yeah, it's quick recall. You get that for free, but it's not the same amount of information necessarily.
Yeah, those are some good thoughts. This section goes into, ability checks and proficiency. It kind of explains that sort of stuff. And then there's, the trying it again, right?
I wanted to talk about this section.
That's a good one.
Well, hit us with your knowledge, Jim.
Well, I don't know if it's so much knowledge as just like I've, over my career as a dungeon master, gone back and forth on whether or not you can attempt a second lockpick check. Because I've thought at times, well, that one check is the sum total of all your actions to unlock the door. But I've also said, okay, you failed, you can try it again, but if you fail a second time, there's going to be a consequence. And I'm not sure which is the best way to go about it. Because if the door's locked and you fail your lockpick check, on the one hand, it's like, well, you tried and you failed. And on the other hand, it's like, so are they just never going to get into that door? Is the door just not an option anymore? And I don't know. I've changed my mind many times.
I've settled, and this is a completely house rule, but I say it almost every night. I'll allow 2 at-bats. You get 2 chances. We're not doing the dog pile. We're not doing rinse and repeat for the rest of the night until you succeed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be rolling dice about it in the first place. 2 people can try this. 1 person can roll with advantage because they're getting helped. 2 different people can do it. If it is If it's a locked door and getting through it is necessary for game night to continue, then I fucked up, or the designer fucked up, and I'll figure out a way around it. If it's a locked door and there's other ways to go, okay, you failed. The other guy with the lockpick failed. If you can, you failed. If you can sell me on another way to go about doing this, if you want to burn down or blow up this door, I'll allow it. But like, you gotta come to me now with options. The easy way is off the table.
Look at this. Spend hit dice to try again. That's a very interesting idea. I do
love
like that.
I love spending hit dice to do.
I
don't do it a lot
Twin Steel.
these days, but yeah, hit dice are underutilized resource, a currency in the game that doesn't get spent a lot.
Well, one of the things that I do is if they've got time, if there's no time crunch, I'm not even going to make them roll. Like if you want to pick a lock and the lock is not trapped, I just say you pick a lock, and that's just a chance to shine the spotlight on the rogue, and I describe him, fiddling with the lock and getting it open, right? But if it's in combat, right, and you're using your action because you're trying to get out of the room to escape this side of the room because the goblins rushed in from the other side of the room, then you can try multiple times, because each time you try, it's using up your action, right?
Yeah.
So I will let multiple dice rolls happen if there's a time crunch and each dice roll is, ticking the time clock down, right? The room is flooding. Every turn the water gets, 3 feet deeper. So each time you pick that, you fail that lock check, the water is getting deeper. So you can keep trying, and it's going to, as soon as the second 3 feet of water hits, like round 2, now that check is even harder because now you're trying to pick the lock underwater, right? So in those kind of situations, I will allow rerolls. So I try to just save myself from the rerolls by not having them make a check at all if there's no possible consequence, right?
Well, see, here's the thing. You can always invent consequences. So there's the thing about, like, it says, if failure has no consequences, the character can try again. You can skip the ability check. And I'm not sure that I like that, because if there's a roll, you have the opportunity for consequences. Like, time is not an issue. You guys don't think there are any monsters nearby. You seems like you have all the time in the world to unlock this, to pick this lock. You roll bad. Now I can introduce a consequence. Oh, you guys hear something from down the hallway.
Right.
And you can't do that if you just bypass the check. Well, I mean,
That's
technically
true.
you can, but it feels more natural to add the consequence of there's somebody coming down the hallway as a result of failing the check.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've done that before, where, especially like if they roll a 1, you have damaged the lock. So now if there is another check, it's going to have to be to break the door down. And even if you avoid this and find another way around, someone who comes behind you is going to realize that someone has tampered with the door because the lock is now broken. So I've done that too. That's a good point, Jim.
Something I was going to say, and Fred beat me to it. I like taking 10. Taking 20, I'm very judicious with. But time is the most important resource that you might be overlooking if you can't figure out how to make things meaningful. So, yes, you can pick this lock. If you take 10 minutes, you can take a 10, right? And if you're proficient in thieves' tools and you're level 3, okay, it's 15, it's medium DC. Yes, you can do it, but it's going to take you 10 minutes. 1, what's everybody else doing for these 10 minutes? 2, excuse me while I roll some dice for a random encounter check or advance the clock or whatever the case may be. You're spending 10 minutes in this dangerous place. Things are happening while you do that. Do you want to take 10, or do you want to try another door?
Yeah, well, and I just scrolled down to kind of skip ahead here, because one of the sections in this chapter is consequences, right? So I figured I'd go ahead and skip there. There we go. So this is where it talks about like success at a cost. I thought there was some interesting ideas in here. So they say if you narrowly miss a roll, you can add a cost. Like say if you miss by 1 or 2, you can let the character succeed at a cost. I thought that was interesting.
Like they stole it back. They stole back the Devil's Bargain from Blades in the Dark. Is what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you need a 15, you roll a 13, you can give that Devil's Bargain to your player to see. The example they give is like you hit but you drop your sword. You escape the fireball by making your save, but now you have the prone condition. So I thought those were some good examples there. And then they also talk about degrees of failure. So if you fail by 5 or more, you might have a degree of failure there. And we were talking about degrees of success earlier when we were talking about knowledge checks, right? Or making history checks and those sort of things. You're giving more information on a higher roll, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we don't have what they come out and call like alternate rules. I forget the term of art now, actually, the old DMG.
Variant.
But variant rule. We don't have any variant rules. But we got a lot of interesting suggestions for how you might change this game if you were, say, familiar with some other popular games that are going around right now.
I like the way they do this much better. Instead of having a chapter of variant rules with everything all thrown together, they're actually in the part of the book where they would be relevant to as an alternate rule. This is way better than the way they did in the 2014 DMG.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a section here on critical success or critical failures. Do you guys use critical failures?
I don't try to make my players look dumb. I don't have them. I don't have the brilliant heroic champion fighter trip over a rock and hit himself in the head with the heel of his sword, the hilt of his sword. No, I don't do that stuff.
But how do you find joy in life?
Yeah, I don't use critical failures in combat just because, like, mathematically it doesn't make sense, because the higher level you get, the more attacks you're making per turn. So you're actually, the risk of critical failure is higher the higher level you become, and that doesn't make sense to me. I'll sometimes use critical failures on skill checks. Like I said, like you break your lockpick off in the lock when you roll a 1. That
Skyrim
kind of
all over again.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm way more likely to honor a 20 than a 1 on an ability check.
Yeah.
I will go for the yucks, though. I think everyone in this room knows that about me by now. I will go for the bit. If I think it'll get a laugh, I'll have failure with inconsequential failure happen if it's funny.
That's one of my favorite parts about you, Ryan, is your commitment to the bit. I even made a comment to that effect on your Deck Save Dan video earlier today.
Oh, yeah. There's some strange answers that I ran with.
I just noticed Jordan PH is silent is in the chat. Welcome.
Hey, Jordan.
As far as I know, this is his first time in the chat. Love your channel, man. Good stuff. And then we get into improvised damage. I thought this was a useful chart. And the idea of if like hot burning coals or getting struck by lightning. I feel like getting struck by lightning should be higher than 2d10 though.
Depends on if you have rubber boots on or not.
That's true. Everyone's grounded. We're insulated. Opposite.
You know this thing about the damage, severity, and level below that? I have a much simpler system. I will reveal to the world now a very, very simple system for improvising trap damage. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Make it equal to their hit dice. Whatever the party level is, hit dice D4 for a minor trap, hit dice D6 for a medium trap, D6 and D8. When you get to D10 and D12, now you're trying to talk about severe and lethal traps. But it's easy. 4th level, 4d6 for a medium trap.
You
Bing,
said
bang,
hit
boom,
dice and I
done.
heard hit points. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. You've shared that before. I don't know if it was when we were live, but you shared that with me before, and I have stolen that idea. I've been using it since then. I like that a lot.
Simple, scalable. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, verisimilitude wise, like, the trap is designed to, to do significant damage. Like, that's the whole point of a trap. You want to either
Spend the resources.
Well, yeah. Well, and then in world, like, if I'm a goblin building a trap, I want to, stop you in your tracks with this trap, or I want to wound you badly enough that you're leaving a blood trail, so we know that you're sneaking around our hideout, right? Best case scenario, it outright kills you, and I don't have to deal with you at all, other than, feeding you to my giant spider pet. So in world, traps should be fairly lethal, right? Even like, modern day hunters who use traps to trap animals, the whole point of it is to keep this animal from escaping, right? You're a hunter and you want this animal to eat. So you want it to stay put once it gets into your trap. So, the idea that damage is scalable to, the character's hit points, that just makes sense to me. Like, intuitively, that makes sense.
This ancient evil wizard wanted to make it slightly annoying to steal his treasure.
Right. Yeah. But I'm also a big believer in telegraphing traps, right? So that, it's not like rock falls, everybody dies. To
the point that it makes me sound confusing sometimes now, but in the last few years I have conflated traps and puzzles. Traps are puzzles in my game design now, and that makes traps way more interesting. That I don't have a ton of puzzles in my games otherwise. It's like, here's yesterday's Wordle. I don't know. I'm not good at coming up with puzzles. So traps and puzzles being that same like pillar of play, that part of exploration that is either very lacking, or oftentimes you get a good puzzle, but it doesn't really feel. It's like, okay, now we're playing a mini game. It doesn't really feel like I'm playing D&D anymore while we figure out how to get the balls in the cups to equal the amount of coins on the altar or whatever. Traps being puzzles and solvable is my goal, is my point now. The point isn't we're going to soften them up and have a gotcha thing. Traps should be pretty deadly, but there should be an interesting way to circumvent them.
Right. I feel like traps need to have at least 2, ideally 3 skill checks, right? Like perception check to find it, investigation check to figure out how it works, and then an appropriate skill check to disarm it, right? If you're not going to disarm it, then it's a saving throw or a stealth check to get past it without triggering it, right? You the tripwire is here. Now you have to make a dexterity check to step over it, right? Or it's and that might be easier, but now everybody has to make that DC 10 dex check to step over the tripwire, or you have a DC 15 check of some kind to disarm it, right? So what do you guys want to do? Again, going back to giving the players choices, I think is important. And then, go ahead, Ryan.
And then if the players are savvy, they can use these untriggered traps to their advantage, right? Like a pit trap is the simplest thing, right? If I know there's a pit trap, and in the next room there's goblins, I can come up with several scenarios to lure those goblins into the pit trap, assuming they are not the ones who dug it, right? But whatever the case may be, they're useful in other ways too, potentially in the hands of smart players.
Right. Well, and Fred says you can deal with traps without rolling dice at all. And of course, that's how it used to be. A lot of times dealing with traps was more like, like what you were describing, Ryan, where it's kind of this, like talking puzzle. Well, I want to try to find a way to reattach the tripwire here and then cut it there so we can walk through this section. But since I've reattached it to these other 2 points, it's not going to trigger the trap, right? The players explain, once they figure out the mechanics of the trap, they explain how they're going to disarm it. And if they have a reasonable explanation and, it all makes sense, that's, similar to a role-play encounter, right? There's a lot of times where the players have a really good role-play encounter. You don't make them roll dice because they're being persuasive, and their character could be that persuasive, right? So you just talk your way through a role-play encounter. You can talk your way through trap encounters as well, like Fred was saying.
Here's something that you might not know, newer folks, or might have forgotten, old experienced grognards out there. Skills are relatively new. There was a time where this game was played and there was no skill checks. You just told the dungeon master what your character was doing, and if it was reasonable, it happened. And if it was unreasonable, well, you died, and then you made a new character, and then you try it, and you learn from that experience. But skills in exploration and in the social side of the game are still something I'm a little suspicious of sometimes, and will use as a fallback, but not as the default.
Yeah. Do you guys have time to tackle one more, or do we need to wrap up?
I don't. My dog is yelling at me the sun went down. It's dinner time. And me and the dog both have to pee, so I'm done.
All right. Well, then we'll pick up next time with improving answers. That's where we'll pick up next week. Before we go, anything you guys want to shout out or say real quick?
I'll say again, I'm on Deck Save Dan's Dicey Discussions that launched today. I had a blast. If it's half as fun to watch as it was to participate in, it's going to be worth watching.
I'll shout out, I've been playing Dragon Age Veilguard. It's awesome. Not as good as Baldur's Gate 3, but very, very good. Very good. Highly recommended.
Cool. Yeah, I've got interviews with Riker from Cleric's Corner coming next week, so stay tuned for those. Tuesday and Thursday, this should be dropping. Yeah.
Good stuff. He's a creative mind. Good dude, and good, cool stuff coming out of there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had fun talking. His was one of the longest interviews I did in this whole mastering the game series I'm doing.
But music recommendation: go listen to "Mexico" by Cake. Great song. I've listened to it a bunch of times this week. "Mexico" by Cake. Great song.
Cool.
Motion to make this part of the stream chat. Jim's corner is now music corner. All agreed?
Agreed.
Let me know.
Okay.
No, I'm not asking you guys. I'm asking the audience. Jim has no say.
So, well, thanks for everybody for tuning in. This has been Casual Fridays. We're here every Friday at 3. See you next week. Thanks again for being here.
Bye.
Bye.